الرحمن الرحيم. عظم الله أجورنا وأجوركم بمصابنا بسيدنا ومولانا أبي عبد الله الحسين، وجعلنا الله وإياكم من الطالبين بثأره بين يدي الإمام المنصور المؤيد المهدي من آل محمد. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وعظيمنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين وأصحابه الغر الميامين. الحمد لله الذي جعلنا من المتمسكين بولاية سيدي ومولاي علي بن أبي طالب. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. أما بعد، يقول الله في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذ قالت امرأة عمران: ربي إني نذرت لك ما في بطني محررا فتقبل مني إنك أنت السميع العليم. The first of our salawat in honor of Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli. The second in honor of Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib. The third with your loudest voices in honor of the Imam of our time, Imam Sahib al-Asr wal-Zaman. There is a request for the brothers to move as close to the front as is possible, as there is no space at all in the back. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, as close as you can. Respected scholars, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. The verse in question, verse 35 of chapter 3 of the Holy Quran, discusses one of the most important topics in Islamic law, known as the topic of making a vow, otherwise translated in the Arabic language as the topic of Nazr. Each and every human being has made a vow at one point or another in their life. And that's why this topic is a topic which requires a thorough analysis. For it is a topic that affects each and every one of our lives. A topic from which many a lesson may be learnt, and indeed many an example may be derived. And a topic with a historical basis and a contemporary significance. When we examine the vows that we've made in our life, we find that at one point or another in our life, this vow has been of the utmost importance to us. We've made a vow, for example, at times with our children, at times with our relatives, at times with our community members. And you find that the reason we make this vow is that there is something which we look forward to, that it's fulfilled in our life. Something, a part of our vision or a target which we've made. The highest vow recognized within the religion of Islam is when one makes a vow towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. For in the same way a person seeks to fulfill his vow with his fellow creation, then there is no vow as important as the vow you make to your Creator. This vow in the Arabic language is known as a Nazr. And that's why you find in many Muslim communities today that many Muslims undertake a Nazr at one point or another in their life. This Nazr, of course, varies from person to person, but there is always an ultimate aim of a wish that seems to need to be fulfilled. As in, sometimes you may find someone who makes a Nazr where they say, "Oh Allah, if so and so is fulfilled, or if act X is fulfilled, then I promise to pledge back towards the religion in this way. Or for example, someone may say, if I perform such an act which is prohibited, then I make a vow that I'm going to give back towards the religion. At one point or another, all of us have made a vow in our lives. Yet this issue of the vow in Islam is not just a legal issue. Yes, within the legal manuals, you'll always find a chapter called the vow or Nazr. If you were to read a book like Wasail al-Shia, one of the main legal manuals in the school of Ahl al-Bayt, there is a whole chapter dedicated to the vow and the penalty if one doesn't fulfill a vow. But the topic of the vow is not just a legal topic, it's also a spiritual topic. Why? Because the act of performing a vow or undertaking a vow is an act which builds my relationship with my Creator. As in many times in our communities today, people complain that they don't have a relationship with their Creator in the way they would like. As in the most common question ever asked in our communities is how can I get closer to my Creator? One of the methods which very much is underestimated is the vow. That a person can undertake a vow in their lives where they speak directly to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Where they make a nadhr that, Ya Allah, there is a certain area in my life which I want to work on, which I want to develop. I therefore undertake a vow that I'm going to develop this area. And if you're willing to help me, and if you do help me, then I'll give back towards the religion. A vow may also be translated as a resolution. That's why when we come towards this first introductory lecture in the month of Muharram, the month of Muharram is seen firstly as the first month in the Islamic calendar. Therefore, I undertake a resolution like a New Year's resolution. But secondly, I need to undertake a vow in relation to the man who was martyred in this month. That from the beginning of this month, I make a nadhr that I'm going to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through the performance of a certain act. Ya Allah, if you help me with this vow, I promise to give back towards those martyrs who died on the 10th of Muharram. Therefore, the topic of a nadhr is not just a legal topic. It's an ethical topic, it's a theological topic, and it's a spiritual topic which affects our lives today. Therefore, in tonight's analysis, I'd like to examine the basis and the background of the nadhr in Islam. Because today we hear in our communities when someone wants to make a nadhr, people reply to them by saying, this is not right, this is not part of the religion of Islam. Let's dissect the origin of the nadhr in the history of the religion by asking the following questions. Number one, this passage, verse 35 of chapter 3, who does it refer to? Who made a nadhr that their child serves Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Number two, how did that child end up making a nadhr themselves? Number three, what are the 4 types of nadhr in Islamic law? And what is the penalty if I do not fulfill a nadhr which I've promised my Lord? Number 4, how did Bani Hashim ensure that a nadhr was one of the spiritual acts which connected them to their Lord? And number 5, which verse in the Quran was revealed in honor of 5 personalities because of a vow they made to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Let's dissect this and dissect the whole topic in depth. The verse in question refers to the nadhr made by a lady by the name of Anne. In the Quran, this lady by the name of Anne, her name is referred to in the Hebrew language as Hannah. She was the mother of Mary. You see, this Hannah, the mother of Mary, was spoken of in the Quran in chapter 3, verse 35. As in, if you were to read within the Bible, or read within the traditions in Christianity, you find within the traditions of Christianity, she is referred to as Anne. She had a particular desire to have a child in her life. Already, her family was a family of piety, her family was a family of respect, but like any lady, there is a desire in her life to have a child. And it seems that there came a point in her life where she felt she was getting older, and there weren't any children in her life. One narration even goes as far as mentioning that she saw a bird or a dove feeding its children, and she prayed to Allah, Ya Allah, In the same way that this bird has children, I ask you to provide me with the rizq that is children in my life as well. When she came forward, she asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with this supplication. And you find in the Quran that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He narrates the story of Jesus, son of Mary, He begins by narrating the story from Jesus' grandmother. Of course, the name of Jesus' grandmother is not given to us in the Quran. In the Quran it says, إِذْ قَالَتْ امْرَأَةُ عِمْرَانَ, said the wife of Imran. What did she say? She came forward by asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, Ya Allah, I want to make a nadhr. Rabbi, inni nadartu laka ma fi batni. When she found out that she was pregnant, she came forward and said a line which should affect anyone who's about to have a child or intends to have a child in the future. What did she say? When she found out she was pregnant, she wanted her relationship with her child to begin while the child was in her womb. A fundamental point on upbringing in Islam. Because if you go to many mothers today and ask them, when did your child, or when did you begin to have a relationship with the upbringing of your child? You'll find some mothers saying, well, as soon as I began to suckle my baby. Others saying when my baby was 6 or 7. Others saying when my baby was 16. Others saying, for example, later on in their lives. Whereas you find within the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sets us a beautiful precedent through Anne, the mother of Mary. The mother of Mary decides that the upbringing of Mary begins while Mary is in her womb. Because she from the beginning recognizes that the child in the womb of the mother can listen to every word that the mother is reciting. In psychology today, there is a series of studies called the womb studies. The womb studies are a series of studies which show that a baby remembers the words which surrounded the mother while the baby was in the womb. If you were to go to look at these studies, many of these studies, what do they indicate? That a baby is able to listen to every sound from the mother. If the mother is speaking the Quran, the baby hears the Quran. If the mother is listening to the words of the musicians, the baby is attached to the words of the musicians. If the mother is gossiping or backbiting, the baby is related to those words and remembers those words. If the mother, for example, is a mother constantly reciting supplications, the baby is attached to those words. As in, I'll never forget a study which I had seen when I was studying psychology, a study of one of the babies which was born. The mother had read the book, The Cat in the Hat. You know Dr. Seuss, The Cat in the Hat? The mother had read this book throughout the pregnancy period. They wanted to see, would this baby recognize the words of the story or no? Because the mother had recited these words while the baby was in the womb. What did they do? They would allow the baby to suckle on a bottle of milk. One bottle was connected to a completely different story. The other bottle was connected to the Cat in the Hat. They found that the baby would suckle faster and more on the bottle that connected to the Cat in the Hat, because the baby had recognized the words from that story. Someone says a baby recognizes the words from the womb, without a doubt. As in within the school of Ahlul Bayt, we have this belief that from the womb of the mother, the baby is able to hear. Number 2, what do you find? She says, Rabbi inni nadartu laka ma fi batni. My Lord, I have made a vow that I'm going to dedicate whatever is in my womb towards your service. Muharraran fataqabbal minni. Muharraran here, what does it mean? It means that I have dedicated what's in my womb towards the service of Allah, free from any shackles. Why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tell her, why were these words recited? That the baby is free from any shackles, because a baby may have the shackles of the parents. What is Anne saying? She's saying, my Lord, this baby I dedicate towards your service, Not only towards your service, I emancipate this baby from the shackles of the parents. I, as the parent of this child, will have nothing to do with the child. I want the child to be dedicated in your service. And you find that this highlights something. What is it? You find that it highlights to us that sometimes what are our aspirations when we find out that our wife is bearing a child? If you come to some people and you say, your wife is now pregnant, what do you want your child to be? You'll find some people saying, oh, I can't wait until my child becomes a doctor like me. Or I can't wait until my child becomes a lawyer like me. I can't wait until my child becomes an accountant like me. I can't wait until my child becomes, for example, someone in the world of finance or someone in the world of medicine. You find she teaches us a lesson where she says, before you think of the career, first say, I want this child to be a dedicated servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because if your child grows up to be a dedicated servant of Allah, then you know they'll make you proud and make the religion proud in the medical field, in the field of business, in the field of law. However, if my child grows up to be not showing any dedication towards the service of Allah, then you'll find that that child may be taken by what? Taken by the fantasies of some of those industries and forget their Lord completely. This mother said that this child of mine, this son of mine, because if you look at the verse, she speaks in the masculine. And in those days, if your child was born and you want your child to be dedicated to the service of the synagogue, only males were allowed to serve within the synagogue. Females were not allowed to serve. That's why when you look at the verse is all in the masculine. إذ قالت امرأة عمران ربي إني نذرت لك ما في بطني محررا فتقبل مني إنك أنت السميع العليم. Oh my Lord, I've dedicated what's in my womb, this child, this male child, I've dedicated them towards your service, free from any of the shackles which I may place. Even Allama Tabatabai says it indicates there was no father present, that Mary's father had died while her mother was pregnant with her. Because the mother is speaking completely in the singular. Yes? Inni nadartu laka ma fi batni muharraran fataqabbal minni. It's completely in the singular. You would expect her, if her husband was alive, to maybe speak in the plural. It seems that Mary, mother of Jesus, her husband had already died. That means, or Mary's mother, her husband had already died. So that, what does it mean? That the mother said, Ya Allah, I make a vow. If you make my pregnancy easy, then I dedicate this child towards your service in the synagogue. This male, I dedicate towards your service. What was born, a male or a female? A female was born, and that's why it was quite a surprise to Anne, as in Anne thought to herself, hold on, Allah has accepted my prayer, but He's accepted it by giving me what? By giving me a female and not a male. In the synagogue in those days, the female could not serve. As in when we say serve, what do we mean? She's in the synagogue, she's constantly worshipping in the synagogue, she's cleaning the floors of the synagogue. Every type of voluntary service within the synagogue, she's providing. She was surprised, and that surprise wasn't unusual. Why? Because in religions from that time until today, the woman in many cases is seen as a second-class citizen, as in the leaders of the religion are always seen as being males. The woman, their role is what? You find some religions, there the woman was always seen as this cursed part of society. That the original sin was because of the woman, so the woman's a curse. In this way, Allah wanted to destroy this idea that a woman cannot reach the same levels as the man in religion. No, a woman can. A woman can be an example in religion like the man. As in otherwise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have easily given a male to Anne, and that male would have served in the synagogue. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was making a point for all of us. What was the point? The point was that do not be wary of allowing your daughters to serve my religion like your sons. Because sometimes, even in the Muslim world today, when you talk of the idea of the leaders of Islamic law, it's always in the males, in the masculine. You never imagine that a female can reach the highest levels of Islamic law. Whereas pertinent discussions within Islamic law today and by jurists clearly show us what? They show us that a female can reach the highest level like the male. As in, if you were to read the works of Ayatollah Sana'i, Ayatollah Ibrahim Jannati, Muhaqqaq Damad, you read their works, you'll find that they say that the woman can reach the highest level in the Islamic legal system. But why is it that you've only restricted the mujtahid to the male? Why is it that the female cannot also be a mujtahidah, not just a mujtahidah, someone who people can do taqleed of? When Anna was surprised, she was surprised because she thought to herself, can a female be allowed to serve within the synagogue? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said there is no problem the female serving in the highest religious institution. That female, if she is abiding by the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is no harm in her serving the religion of God. The beautiful line therefore from this was what? That her mother already built a relationship with her Lord by making a nadhr. The word nadhr is clear. إذ قالت امرأة عمران ربي إني نذرت لك ما في بطني محررا فتقبل مني إنك أنت السميع العليم. She had made a nadhr and she fulfilled that nadhr. She made sure that that nadhr was fulfilled, and she made sure that Mary was allowed to serve within the synagogue. The point then became clear that the vow or the nadhr in Islam became part of the teachings of the holy personalities of the religion. And that's why Maryam herself decided that if my mother made a vow to God, then why do I not take the same vows which God may want from me? Because you know, when Mary began to serve in the synagogue, she was given the highest of positions. Prophet Zakaria alayhi salam was her guardian. He was the one who was looking after her in the synagogue. In the summer seasons, fruits of the winter would come to her. In the winter seasons, fruits of the summer would come to her. And Prophet Zakaria was honoring her, protecting her, until Allah gave him John the Baptist. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also decided to breathe His Spirit into Maryam. Maryam, knowing that she was of a virgin origin, she was uncertain, what am I meant to do in this difficult time? That I'm in a very difficult situation. My Lord has put me in a situation where I am pregnant, but no man has touched me. Is there any way in which I can make a vow to my Lord? Or does my Lord want me to make a vow which He's going to help me with? You found the second usage of the word nadhr in the Quran came with Maryam, daughter of An. For Maryam had seen her mother An make a vow about her pregnancy. What did Maryam decide to do? Maryam decided that in the same way my mother makes a vow, I want to make a vow as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala orders her to make a vow. And she therefore makes the vow in front of the children of Israel. Why? You know, the children of Israel, when they saw her pregnant and they saw her in difficulty, some of them said to her, we wouldn't think you're a lady of such bad reputation. How is it that you are pregnant when no man has touched you? She replied with a vow known in the English language as the vow of silence. In the Quran she says, Inni nadartu lirrahmani sawma. I have made a vow, but the vow is different from my mother. My mother's vow is, Ya Allah, if I have an easy pregnancy, I will dedicate this child to your service. My vow is that when they attack me, who is that child? I will make a vow to Allah that I'll remain silent. And I know in return that while I'm going through this trial, Allah will protect me and protect my child. You know, Pythagoras used to tell his disciples, make a vow of silence. For the vow of silence is powerful in the life of the human being. Likewise in Hinduism, in Jainism, in Buddhism, one of the greatest vows anyone can ever undertake is the vow of silence. That sometimes in life you make a covenant to your Creator that I'm going to make a vow of silence. Through this vow, I'm disciplining myself. Maryam, in using the word nadhr, what did she say? She said, Inni nadartu lirrahmani sawma. I have made a vow that I'm going to make the vow of fasting. Imam al-Baqir, salawatullah wa salamu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. See, the word in the Arabic language, what is it? I have made the vow of fasting. Someone says, but fasting is to keep away from food and drink. Imam al-Baqir was one day tested by one of the Christian scholars. The Christian scholar said to him, which fast can you eat and you can drink? Imam al-Baqir said, the fast of Maryam, when her fast was silence. The fast of Maryam was what? Her vow was to fast, meaning that she'd remain silent. Because she knew Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if she made a vow to him of silence, Allah will inspire her son to be able to speak. And truly, what happened? When they all pointed towards her, she wouldn't speak. She'd point towards the child. And the child would say, Inni Abdullah hatani al-kitaba wa ja'alani nabiyya. Therefore, you found that the second vow was undertaken in the same family. The first nadhr was the nadhr of Anne, the mother of Mary. The second nadhr was the nadhr of Maryam. And that's why within the religion of Islam, nadhr was divided into 4 different categories. This is a vital area I need you to understand. Because when people ask how many different types of nadhr are there within Islam, there are 4 different types of nadhr within Islamic thought. The first type of nadhr within Islamic thought is the nadhr known as nadhr al-shukr, the nadhr of thankfulness. What is this nadhr? This is a nadhr where you make a vow to Allah. Ya Allah, if you help me on a certain area in my life, I vow to thank you by giving something away. Bukhari narrates that the Prophet said, if there's one benefit to come out from a vow, it's that the stingy person will spend some money. True? As in what happens is, in the nadhr of shukr, is when I make a vow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that, Ya Allah, if you help me in a certain act, I'm going to give towards a certain pledge towards one of your institutions. In which way? For example, I've got university exams coming up this week. When I have these university exams, I make a nadhr. And this nadhr is beautiful. Why? Because it's one of the beautiful ways in which I can speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I say to Allah, Ya Allah, I make a nadhr. If you help me with my exam results, I'm going to give £100 towards an orphanage in one of the cities where poverty is affecting them. This is called the nadhr of shukr, or the nadhr of birr. In which way? In that I made a vow that I want something to happen, but I'm going to show thankfulness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in return. For example, I can make a nadhr, Ya Allah, if my friend gets married, I promise, Ya Allah, to help the mosque by building an extension. Someone has made what? Now when that person builds the extension for the mosque, that's a nadhr of thankfulness. They have made a pledge to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of thankfulness. That, Ya Allah, help me in this area, I will give back towards you. Another type of nadhr, that same nadhr, Ya Allah, for example, the nadhr of shukr. Me and my wife cannot have children. Ya Allah, if you help us to have children, I will give back towards the cause of a charity in Islam. All of these continue the sunnah of who? Continue the sunnah of Anne, the mother of Mary. And the mother of Mary said, Ya Allah, you help me in my pregnancy. My nadhr is that my child is dedicated towards your cause. Likewise, that nadhr, when you say that you can't have children, it's very sad in Muslim communities today. Many couples who cannot have children do not undertake the usage of a vow. Why not make a nadhr? Say, Ya Allah, I'm making this nadhr. That's why Abu Dawood narrates in his Sunan, he narrates that a person came towards the Holy Prophet and said to him that, Ya Rasulullah, I made a nadhr that I will sacrifice a camel on the outskirts of the Yambu area. I will sacrifice a camel because of what? If Allah provides me and my wife with a child. Rasulullah looked at him. He said to him, is that area a place where the idols are worshipped? He said to him, no. Is that area a place where they used to have festivals in honor of the idols? He said, no. He said, then very well, as long as there is no disobedience to Allah in the fulfilling of a nadr, then you're allowed to sacrifice that camel because Allah has given you a male child. You find therefore that first type of nadr is one we need to employ more in our communities. As in when a person today comes and said, Ammar, I don't know how to build a relationship with Allah. The first way of building a relationship with Allah is nadr shukr. That I say, Ya Allah, if this happens in my life, then I promise to thank you in this way. As in, do you know how many parents today have daughters who can't get married? When those parents have daughters who can't get married, yes, a person goes through the means of the community, asks the matchmakers of the community, but then may come a point where a person says, Ya Allah, I make a nadr between me and you, that if my daughter gets married, I promise to give back towards my community in this way. Someone asks on this area, can I make a nadr in the name of one of the servants of Allah? Because today you have people who make a nadr in the name of, for example, the Holy Prophet, or in the name of the Sahaba of the Prophet, or in the name of the family of the Prophet, or in the name of personalities like al-Baneen. Have you heard certain people say that I'm making a nadr in the name of who? A nadr in the name of al-Baneen. What do they mean? They're trying to say that, for example, Ya Allah, I ask you in the name of al-Baneen, that this area of my life I need help in. So I promise, Ya Allah, if you help me, I'm going to give back towards your cause. Is this allowed or no? Of course it's allowed. Why not? Because the question of the nadr is directed at Allah. The intermediary is Baneen. This is a vital point. That when I make a nadr towards Baneen, the ultimate vow is to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The intermediary may be someone who Allah honored their sacrifice, who died in the way of Allah, who sacrificed in the way of Allah. Therefore, is it allowed for a person to make a nadr in the name of one of the saints of Allah? There is no problem there at all. So the first type of nadr, nadr shukr. The second type of nadr, what is it? It is a nadr which is called istidfa'an lil-baliyya. What is this type of nadr? This second type of nadr is where you make a vow for Allah if He removes a certain hardship from your life. All of us in this world suffer a hardship at one point or another, isn't it? Some of us, we have family members who may suffer from a certain disease. Some of us have a family member who may suffer from a certain illness or a virus. Some of us may go through a trial which isn't our health. It may be in our business or maybe with our children. The second type of nadr, istidfa'an lil-baliyya, is what? Is this nadr where you say that, Ya Allah, I promise if you keep away the trial from me or you remove this trial, I am going to make sure that I give back towards you. You see, the first type of nadr is you want some act in your life to definitely be fulfilled. The second type is no, is that there's a grievous calamity that's affected you. You want it to be removed. The second type of nadr is a nadr where you ask Allah that I'm making a vow. If you ensure this nadr is this particular area is protected from me, removed, then I will ensure that I give towards your cause. That's number two. The third type of nadr, what is it? The third type of nadr, they call it nadr al-zajr. Nadr al-zajr, what is it? It is a nadr where there's a certain area of your life you have been unjust towards Allah with. Please mark this point. There's an area in your life you've been unjust to Allah with. Either in an area of obligatory status or in an area of prohibition. What do I mean? I'm neglectful of my prayers. Salat al-Dhuhr at 1:15, I pray it at 4:30. Salat al-Maghrib is at, for example, 5:30, I pray it at 11:45. Nadr al-Zajr is when I say to Allah, I make a vow that if I pray late again, every time I pray late, oh Allah, I will, for example, not eat dinner that night. That is one of the highest nadhrs in the religion of Islam, and is also one of the most spiritually disciplining vows in the religion. It's a vow that's not just in Islam, but in Buddhism, Hinduism, and other of the spiritual schools. That sometimes in life we need to audit an important account, not our home or mortgage or business account, the account of our relation with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sometimes in life we have neglected our relation with Allah. We're recognizing that we keep promising to pray on time, we're not. We keep promising to read Quran once a week, but we're not. We keep promising to stay away from intoxicants which affect our life, but we don't. We keep promising to stop listening to the words of those whose language is against the path of Allah, but we don't. Many people come and lecture about these things, but it's still not affecting us. So what's one of the best ways of making sure we remove this? We make a proper pledge. Ya Allah, I make a vow. If I do not stop listening to the music of the musicians, then every night in which I listen to music, I will not eat dinner that night. Oh Ya Allah, if I miss Salat al-Fajr tomorrow morning, then I have to make it up with 20 units of prayer in the evening in honor of that prayer. Some say, but isn't that a bit too far? No, the scholars of spirituality say sometimes when you make such a vow, when you have to fulfill it, it hurts you that you make sure you don't make that mistake again. Isn't it? As in, if I make a vow that Fajr I keep missing every day, if I keep missing it and say, well, you know what, it's sad that I miss Fajr, I'll try and make it up, that's not going to be enough. If, however, I say, every time I miss Fajr now, then I'm going to make sure that that night I'm not eating anything. Or for example, I will make sure that 20 rak'ah of prayer I'll pray that night. By the end of not eating that night, with your stomach killing you, and you're looking at your wife's food and you're thinking it looks delicious tonight, but you've made a vow to Allah you don't want to break, that nadhr is called nadhr al-zajr, which means that you put a certain pressure on your nafs. You make a vow to Allah and you make sure that you fulfill that vow. And many of the greatest scholars in Islamic history will tell you this helped them. Many of the greatest scholars will tell you that we kept on making vows to Allah. Ya Allah, I'm going to change this area in my life. I'm not ready, but I'm going to do it. Talking lip service will not take you anywhere. You know what you need to do? You need to recite the words, Ya Allah, I promise, if I don't recite Fajr this morning, then Ya Allah, I don't want to eat dinner tomorrow, purposely. So I'll make sure the pangs of hunger of that night affect me to wake up for Fajr the next day. In that way, that third type of nadhr is called nadhr al-zajr. And many of the most spiritual personalities use this. In Buddhism and in Hinduism, they used it. Why? A person says, I can't stop my desires. I feel an overflow of my desires. I keep on wanting to engage in my desires. If I engage in them in the wrong way again, then I will make sure that I make a vow to Allah to punish myself because of this reason. Therefore, that was the third type of nadhr. The fourth type of nadhr was called nadhr al-tabarru'. What is that nadhr? That's a nadhr where you say, Ya Allah, I want to make a vow to dedicate to you an act I dedicated to you because of how much I love you. What is this type of nadhr? Ya Allah, I don't need to pray Salat al-Layl, but I make a vow to pray Salat al-Layl because of my love for you. Because I know Salat al-Layl is the kafara for our sins in the day. I know Salat al-Layl is the zina of the hereafter, like my children are the zina of this world. Nadhr al-tabarru', you don't need to ask anything in return. You say, Ya Allah, I don't want you to do anything for me. It's me who should do everything for you. That level, when you reach it, is a level where you say, whether you give me or you don't, I feel freedom in worshipping you. Doesn't Amir al-Mu'mineen say that there are those who worship you out of fear of hell? That is the worship of a slave. There are those who worship you because they want heaven. That's the worship of a businessman. Then there are those who worship you because they know you're worthy of worship. That's the worship of a free individual. That fourth type of nadhr is what? Ya Allah, I make a vow that I want to dedicate Salat al-Layl to you. I don't care if you don't give me anything back. You've given me too much. I'm greedy to ask for more. You've given me health and wealth and children and all forms of rizq. How dare I expect something back in return? Someone asked the question legally, what if I make a vow and I don't fulfill the vow? Then there is a kafara to be paid. Without a doubt, there is a penalty to be paid. If you read the manual of the grand scholars of Islam alive today, and the manuals of those who've come before us, they say, if you say the wording of a vow, Ya Allah, I promise if I pass my exam, I promise if I get married, I promise if I have children, I will give this back in return to you, and you do not give back in return, then what happens? There's a kafara, either the feeding of the poor or the fasting on consecutive days. In the same way the kafara applies to other areas, there is a kafara also if you do not fulfill your vow. That's why this issue of the vow became so important that Bani Hashim from their origin found that making a nadhr to Allah would ensure their relationship with Allah would be the strongest. Where did the nadhr of Bani Hashim begin? The nadhr of Bani Hashim began all the way from the time of Abdul Muttalib. Abdul Muttalib one day is sleeping by the Kaaba. He sees a dream that Allah instructs him to go and open the area of Zamzam so that it may gush forth again. See, there was a time when the area of Zamzam was not gushing forth from the origin when Ismail was around. When Abdul Muttalib saw this dream, he wanted to tell the people that there is the area of Zamzam I've been commanded to allow it to spring again. The people looked at him, they said to him, what do you mean, open the area of Zamzam? That area has been blocked for years. And who are you going to open it with? You've only got one son, Harith. You don't have any other sons. Abdul Muttalib said, very well, if you're not going to help me, then I'll make a vow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another, my vow to Allah is what? My vow to Allah is, Ya Allah, if you give me sons who will help me look after the Kaaba, your house, and you give me sons who help me open up the Zamzam water, I'll sacrifice one of my sons in dedication back to you. Now that nadhr is the ultimate nadhr. When a person's willing to sacrifice his child for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, isn't it? That nadhr is a nadhr of the ultimate sacrifice, an Abrahamic sacrifice. Abdul Muttalib, Allah gave him a number of sons. When Abdullah, his son, was 16, he was reminded, but now that Allah has given you all of these sons, you've promised to give back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You promised to sacrifice one of your sons. He said, yes, I promised to sacrifice one of my sons. They said to him, so sacrifice Abdullah. He said, very well, if it means I have to sacrifice my son for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then very well, bring my son. Abdullah, his maternal uncles found out from Medina. They left the land of Medina. They came towards Abdul Muttalib. They said to him, what do you think you're doing? He said, I'm sacrificing my son for the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They said to him, we don't want our son sacrificed. You may have made that will, you may have made that vow, but we want our son to be honored. He said to them, so what do you want to do? They said that what we want is that you cast lots. If your son's name comes out, then we'll increase the number of camels we'll give from ourselves. Until the camels come out, then that will be the number of camels we give. So imagine there's 2 lots, you cast one, whatever comes out will be the result. You pick the first time, Abdullah. He's like, I'm going to have to sacrifice him. They're like, no, pick again, 10 camels. Second time, Abdullah, pick again, 20 camels. Again, Abdullah, again, until 10 times Abdullah. Then the camels came out of the lot. They said, very well, we will now give 100 camels towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in exchange for the sacrifice of Abdullah. Here, Abdul Muttalib wanted to sacrifice his son, but there seemed to be a problem with the maternal uncles. So instead, you found that Abdul Muttalib said, in respect of these maternal uncles, I'm going to sacrifice 100 camels towards the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's as if at the same time Allah informs that progeny that from this Abdullah will come Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. From this Abdullah, of course, came the Holy Prophet. And you found that in the same way the Holy Prophet saw his grandfather Abdul Muttalib make a vow of sacrifice. Likewise, Rasulullah used to instruct his companions, try and make one of the 4 sacrifices. Try and make Nazr al-Shukr, or Nazr istidfa'an lil-baliya or balaya, or for example, Nazr al-Zajr, or Nazr al-Tabarru'. One of them, try and make them in your life. He would also instruct the house of Fatima al-Zahra on this area. He would say to O Fatima and Ali, in your lifetime, make a vow, make a nazr. If there's a trial or a tribulation or a calamity or an area you want to get closer to Allah, then make a vow to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Did they make a vow to Allah? Without a doubt they did. In one of the most famous incidents within the Holy Quran, you found that Rasulullah, that day in the mosque when Imam al-Hassan was 5, Imam al-Husayn was around 4, that day in the mosque Rasulullah noticed that Hassan and Husayn have not come to the mosque. What is the issue? He went to Fatima al-Zahra. He said to her, "Oh Fatima," and this is a contemporary example for each and every one of us in the hall. Each and every one of us, if we were to see an illness in any of our children, or a disease, or a virus, use the nidhr of Fatima al-Zahra on this occasion. Because Rasulullah, what did he do? He came to Fatima. He said to her, "Fatima, what is wrong?" She said, "Hassan and Husayn are ill, Ya Rasulullah, and we were not able to bring them." He said, "Then why do you not make a nidhr?" I said, "What's the nidhr, Ya Rasulullah? What should we make?" He said, "Make a nidhr that if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala relieves them of their illness, then you will fast for 3 consecutive days." This nidhr is a sunnah for us all. That sometimes in life, when you hear of an illness in your family, yes, dua is one thing, but why not tell your family member, why don't you do the nidhr of Fatima and Ali? Why not say to Allah, I will fast for consecutive days until they are relieved of the illness? He told them, fast on 3 consecutive days. And then what happens? When promise Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if they are relieved of the illness, then you will fast for 3 consecutive days. That is the promise you should make to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in our lives as well, if we see that our children are ill, we should say, Ya Allah, we promise that if our children fall ill, we promise 3 fasts towards your cause. When Hassan and Husayn were relieved of their illness, what do the narrations mention? The narrations mention that Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, when they were relieved of their illness, of course they wanted to gather some food in order that they're able to break their fast. They didn't have much food for them in their house. So what would happen? Ali ibn Abi Talib would go and get some wool. Fatima al-Zahra would spin the wool. From that they would be able to get a certain amount of barley. Fatima al-Zahra would make the bread from the barley and they'd be prepared to break their fast. On the first day, when they were prepared to breaking their fast, a person knocks at that house, the house of generosity, the house of honor. A person knocks at that house, knocks at the door, and he says, "O family of the Prophet, I am someone who is poor and I have no one to help me. I beg you, can you give me from what you have?" You found straight away Fatima al-Zahra provides him with the bread that they were going to break their fast with. Because they saw in the same way Allah was generous with our children, why should we not be generous with the children of others? This poor man, do they know, is he Muslim? Is he not Muslim? No. Their concern is that he's a miskeen. And a miskeen should never be left without food. So they give their food away on that first day. Do you know what they break their fast with? Water. Because the very least a human deserves to have in their life is water next to them, isn't it? The very least. On the second day, as they're about to break their fast, another man knocks at the door. When they answer, the reply is, "I am a yatim, I'm an orphan. and I have no one to look after me, no one to protect me, no one to honor me. So again, Fatima al-Zahra and Amir al-Mu'mineen decide to give the bread towards that orphan. And then on the third day, when they're about to break their fast, for 2 days consecutively, imagine, this family only lived on water, nothing else, for 2 days consecutively. On the third day, as they're about to break their fast, you found that on the third day a man comes who's a prisoner, a captive. He says, "Oh, family of the Prophet, I have no one to provide me with any food." Straight away the family give that food. When Rasulullah comes to see them, he notices the eyes have now sunk into the sockets. He notices the paleness of the color of Fatima and Ali. He asked them what happened. They said, "Ya Rasulullah, you said to us, make a nadhr. We made a nadhr that if Hassan and Husayn recover, then what will we do? We'll fast for 3 consecutive days. Ya Rasulullah, on each of these days, we've only been on water." You found Rasulullah had ordered that the food was to be given. But then Jibreel came to Rasulullah and he said, "Ya Rasulullah, Allah has honored the nadhr of Fatima al-Zahra and Ali ibn Abi Talib. But Allah honored the nadhr in Surah 76, Surah Al-Insan, with the word nadhr. The word nadhr is used. يوفون بالنذر ويخافون يوما كان شره مستطيرا ويطعمون الطعام على حبه مسكينا ويتيما وأسيرا. What does the Quran say? They fulfill their nadhr. يوفون بالنذر ويخافون يوما كان شره مستطيرا, because they fear a day when all the evils will be revealed. I made a nadhr with Allah that I'm going to fast. I fear a day that Allah will ask me, why didn't you fulfill? We give our food. يطعمون الطعام. They give the food على حبه, for their love of who? Allah? No, for their love of the food. They are hungry. They want to eat. The food looks beautiful, but servitude to Allah is even more beautiful to them. يطعمون الطعام على حبه مسكينا ويتيما وأسيرا. Then when the prisoner and the orphan and the poor person says to them, "Can we give you something back in return?" They reply, "إنما نطعمكم لوجه الله لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا." We have fed you for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't want any reward from you, nor any thankfulness. We have made a pledge to Allah. We said, "Ya Allah, Hassan and Husayn are ill. If we promise you we'll fast for 3 days if you relieve them," Allah has relieved Hassan and Husayn. We have fasted for 3 days. We are honored. But Allah said, يُوفُونَ بِالنَّذْرِ. They fulfill their nadhr. They don't neglect it. I say to Allah, Ya Allah, on that verse you honored those 5 personalities. You honored those 5 personalities, but at least they had water to drink. When they broke their fast, at least there was some water in the house. Ya Allah, 50 years later, the last of them lies on the ground in Karbala, lies with arrows surrounding his body, with no one to protect him, with no one to honor him, with the horses mutilating his body. That's why that particular harrowing scene of Imam al-Husayn on the ground in Karbala stuck with his son Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, to the extent this following narration, when one of the Maraji' heard it, they narrate he fell unconscious because of how much he cried. Imam al-Baqir narrates, when my father Imam Zayn al-Abidin was in his final moments, I saw the poison began to surround his body. When I saw the poison surrounding his body, I came near him. I saw my father in pain, so I came and I hugged the chest of my father. Those of you who've seen your father pass away, how difficult is it seeing your father in his final moments? Imam al-Baqir said, I saw him in so so much pain, I came and I embraced his chest. He said, when I embraced his chest, I saw him cry in a way I've never ever seen him cry before. I looked towards him. I said to him, oh my father Zayn al-Abidin, why do you cry? When in a moment you'll see Rasulullah, in a moment you'll see Fatima al-Zahra, in a moment you'll see Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, in a moment you'll see Imam al-Hassan, and in a moment you'll see Imam al-Husayn. Oh my father, why do you cry? Why do you cry when in a moment you'll see all of them? Listen to the reply. He said to him, oh my son Muhammad, I cry because when I am dying you are on my chest, whereas you know who lay on the chest of my father Abu Abdullah when he lay on the ground in Karbala with no one to protect him. I had to see Shimmer sitting on the chest of my father, and I wasn't able to come to the support of my father. Imam al-Baqir then continued. He said, when we washed the body of my father Zayn al-Abidin, we saw two marks on his body. One of the marks I recognized, but the other one I never knew it was still there. They asked him which mark. He said the mark which I recognized was the mark on the back of my father. That mark was from the heavy bags which he used to carry to the poor in the middle of the night. The bruising had remained on his back. So they said to him, oh Muhammad al-Baqir, then which mark do you not recognize? Which mark was the one you were surprised with? He said the mark which surprised me was the mark of the chains of the neck of my father. I never knew that since Sham those marks had remained on the neck of my father Zayn al-Abidin. I never knew that the chains had gone that deep into his neck. Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. May Allah bless all your tears. May Allah bless your tears, inshallah, brothers and sisters. These are tears which inshallah will speak on the day of judgment. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to raise us with Muhammad and Al Muhammad. Ya Allah, allow us to fulfill our vows. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with the following dua. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma inna narghabu ilayka fi dawlatin karima tu'izzu biha al-Islam wa ahlah wa tudhillu biha al-nifaq wa ahlah wa taj'aluna fiha min ad-du'ati ila ta'atik wal qadati ila sabilik wa tarzuqna biha karamat ad-dunya wal akhirah. اللهم ما عرفتنا من الحق فحملناه وما قصرنا عنه فبلغناه. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the Surah Al-Fatiha, but before it the loudest of your salawat.